"Kneel before me," she said, but her voice betrayed a secret desire. The whisper of rebellion, Commander Thora Valkyr stood beneath the crystalline dome of the Judgment Hall, her silver-blue skin catching fragments of light that spilled through the translucent ceiling. Each beam refracted into prismatic displays across the polished obsidian floor, creating a celestial dance that belied the tension in the chamber. The assembled court, representatives from 12 star systems, watched with predatory anticipation, their varied anatomies conveying a singular collective hunger for the spectacle about to unfold. In the center of the hall knelt the human prisoner, Nolan Reed. His shoulders were squared despite his position of submission, and the dirt of a dozen worlds still clung to his tattered flight jacket. The insignia of the Terran Mercantile Guild had been deliberately torn from his sleeve, a small act of defiance that had not escaped Thora's notice. "Look at me, human," Thora commanded, her voice carrying the distinctive harmonic undertones of the Lysandrian race. The dual-toned quality made her words seem to echo even in the cavernous space. Nolan raised his head slowly, meeting her gaze with eyes the color of earthen amber. A smile played at the corners of his mouth, not the trembling fear she was accustomed to seeing in those brought before her, but something closer to amusement. "Commander Valkyr," he acknowledged, his voice carrying easily across the hall. "Lovely venue you've chosen for our reunion, though the floor's a bit hard on human knees. Maybe consider carpeting for your next captive." A ripple of murmurs spread through the gathered dignitaries. The counselor from Praxis 4 shifted uncomfortably on his hovering platform. Thora's facial tendrils twitched, an involuntary response she immediately controlled, aware that the more perceptive members of the court would have noticed. "You stand. Accused of trespassing in the forbidden Nixian sector, theft of Imperial technology and—" She paused for effect. "Seditious communication with known enemies of the Dominion." "That's quite a resume," Nolan replied, shifting his weight slightly. "Though if we're being technical, I was floating in the Nixian sector, not standing. Zero gravity and all that." Several dignitaries emitted sounds that might have been laughter. Thora's second-in-command, Lieutenant Dra, stepped forward with a warning hiss, but she halted him with a subtle gesture. "You find your situation amusing?" she asked, stepping closer. The gold filigree of her ceremonial armor caught the light, designed to intimidate with its suggestion of wealth and power. Nolan's eyes tracked her movement, calculating. "I find most situations amusing, Commander. It's a human coping mechanism. That and making inappropriate jokes at formal proceedings." "Such as this one?" she asked, her tone dangerously soft. "Well, it's hardly a party without refreshments," he quipped, glancing around the hall. "Though your guards did serve me something resembling food this morning, I think it was still moving." This time the laughter was unmistakable. Even Ambassador Zorl, typically stoic, rumbled with something approximating mirth. Thora circled him slowly, her boots making no sound on the polished floor, another intimidation tactic taught to all Dominion officers. "You will pledge your allegiance to the Celestial Dominion and reveal your contacts within the rebellion. Only then might mercy be granted." Nolan followed her movement, turning his head rather than exposing his back to her. "I've never been great at pledges. Failed spectacularly. At Terran Scout Camp. Couldn't remember the words." "This is not a game, Reed," she said, using his name for the first time. "The words are simple. I submit to the will of the Dominion now and forever." "That does sound simple," he agreed. "But I've got a terrible memory. Might need to hear you say it a few more times." The tendrils framing Thora's face rippled with irritation. This human was proving more difficult than anticipated. The trial was meant to be a formality, a public submission to reinforce the Dominion's supremacy over captured dissidents. Instead, he was transforming it into theater of his own making. Perhaps a demonstration of Dominion justice would help. "Your memory," she suggested, signaling to Lieutenant Dras. The reptilian officer approached with a humming neural staff. Something flickered in Nolan's eyes then, the first hint of genuine concern, but his easy smile remained. "Your hospitality is overwhelming, Commander." Before Draz could reach him, the massive doors at the far end of the hall hissed open. A slender figure glided through, wrapped in robes of shifting color that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. The emissary from the High Council had arrived. "This proceeding will pause," announced the synthesized voice of the courts. "Aye. The Honorable Emissary Tikvoon requests audience." The court rose in unison. Even Thora inclined her head respectfully. Only Nolan remained as he was, still kneeling, though his eyes followed the newcomer with obvious interest. "Commander Felker." The emissary's voice was melodic yet authoritative. "The prisoner will be questioned privately before any judgment is rendered." Thora's tendrils stiffened in surprise. "Emissary, with respect, this human has violated multiple—" "The council's decision is final," interrupted Tikvoon. "Escort the prisoner to the contemplation chamber. You will attend personally." The assembled court vibrated with whispers. Such a deviation from protocol was unprecedented. Nolan finally rose to his feet, brushing dust from his knees with exaggerated "Kare. Will there be refreshments at this private session? I find interrogation builds quite an appetite." Thora stepped closer, her voice pitched for his ears alone. "Your insolence borders on suicidal, human." His smile widened fractionally. "Yet here, I am still breathing. Curious, isn't it?" Something unspoken passed between them. A challenge, perhaps even a flicker of reluctant respect. Thora gestured sharply, and two guards flanked Nolan, though they seemed hesitant to touch him. As they moved through the winding corridors of the Citadel, Thora observed her prisoner more closely. He walked with an easy confidence despite his chains, eyes constantly scanning his surroundings. Not the behavior of a common smuggler, but something more practiced. "The forbidden sector contains nothing of value to someone like you," she said, keeping pace beside him. "What were you really doing there?" Nolan glanced sideways, his expression suddenly serious. "Would you believe sightseeing? I heard the quantum nebulas are spectacular this time of year." The contemplation chamber was small compared to the grandeur of the judgment hall. Its walls shifted with subtle patterns of light, designed to disorient and confuse non-Lysandrians. Yet Nolan seemed unaffected, taking a seat in the interrogation chair without being directed. The emissary dismissed the guards with a gesture, leaving only Thora and Nolan in the chamber with the mysterious official. "Commander," Tikvoon said, "what you are about to hear is classified at the highest level." Thora's tendrils twitched with surprise. "Emissary?" "The human is an asset. His capture in the Nixian sector was orchestrated." Nolan leaned back in his chair, chains clinking softly. "And there goes my reputation as a master smuggler. I told them this plan was too complicated." Thora's mind raced. "An asset? This human works for the Dominion?" "Not exactly," the emissary replied. "For certain elements within the Council who recognize the growing threat of the void convergence." Suddenly, the pieces aligned in Thora's mind. The mysterious disappearances along the outer colonies. The strange energy signatures detected near abandoned outposts. The Council's increasing restrictions on information. "The convergence is more than a myth?" she asked. "Unfortunately," Nolan interjected, all traces of humor gone from his face. "And they're a lot closer than your precious council has been admitting to the public." Tikvoon's robes shimmered with tension. "Reed has been gathering intelligence, at great personal risk. His capture needed to appear genuine to maintain his cover with certain elements within both the rebellion and the Dominion itself." Thora stared at Nolan, reassessing everything she thought she knew about him. "You allowed yourself to be captured. The performance in the hall was entertaining, wasn't it?" His smile returned, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing sells authenticity like genuine disrespect for authority." "The Council is divided, Commander," continued the emissary. "Some refuse to acknowledge the convergence threat. Others actively work against those trying to prepare our defenses." "And you need me because?" Thora asked, already suspecting the answer. "Your military record is impeccable, your loyalty to the Dominion unquestioned, And most importantly, Tikvoon paused. You have no close connections that could be used as leverage against you. The implication was clear. Whatever they were asking would put her at risk. Significant risk. We need you to publicly claim Reed as your personal prisoner, explained the emissary. A trophy of sorts. It will allow him the freedom to continue his work while under your supposed supervision. Nolan leaned forward, chains rattling. Think of it as adopting a pet human. I'm house-trained, mostly. Thora's tendrils flattened against her skull, a sign of deep contemplation among her people. This arrangement would damage my standing with certain factions. Precisely why it must be you, said Tikvoon. Your reputation can withstand the whispers, and no one would question your ability to control a single human. You'd be surprised, muttered Nolan. Done, said the emissary. Nolan grinned, extending his shackled hands. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, Commander. Remove those, Thora instructed, gesturing to his restraints. But understand this, human. In public, you will show proper deference. The submission ceremony will proceed as planned. So I still have to kneel? He asked, rubbing his freed wrists. With appropriate reluctance, she conceded. For appearances. As they prepared to return to the judgment hall, Nolan paused at the chamber door. Just so we're clear, Commander, I don't actually kneel for anyone, but for the sake of the galaxy, I'll make it look convincing. Their eyes met, an unspoken challenge passing between them. For the first time since the human had been brought before her, Thora allowed herself a slight smile. We shall see, Reed. We shall see. Chains of sovereignty. Captain Jody Cower stared through the energy barrier at her newest prisoner, her face deliberately impassive despite the storm of emotions. Beneath, the man sat cross-legged on the floor of his cell, eyes closed in what appeared to be meditation, seemingly unconcerned with his dire circumstances. His dark hair was pulled back in a disheveled knot, and a jagged scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, a mark of someone who had survived when others intended otherwise. Zarek Voros, she said, her voice cutting through the humming of the containment field. Leader of the Helix insurgency, responsible for attacks on 3 Dominion outposts, and now my problem. The prisoner opened his eyes slowly, a striking violet hue that marked him as a genetically enhanced colonist from the Rigel system. His lips curved into the barest suggestion of a smile. Captain Cower of the renowned Judgment Fleet, he replied, making no move to stand. Your reputation precedes you. They say you've never lost a prisoner. They say correctly. She adjusted the settings on the barrier control, increasing transparency so she could better observe him. The detention center on Outpost Helios 9 was her domain, a converted mining facility on the edge of contested space. Far from the opulence of the core worlds, Helios 9 was all utilitarian efficiency and brutal purpose. Zarek tilted his head, studying her with unsettling intensity. Interesting assignment for someone of your caliber, isn't it? Babysitting a rebel in this forgotten corner of the Empire. Jody's fingers stilled on the control panel. His words probed a sensitive point. Her recent reassignment from Fleet Command to this remote outpost had been unexpected and unwelcome. A temporary measure, her superiors had called it, though she suspected otherwise. Stand when addressing an officer of the Dominion, she ordered, deliberately ignoring his question. To her surprise, Zarek rose fluidly to his feet, though his posture remained casual, almost mocking in its relaxed nature. Standing, he was taller than she had expected, his prisoner's jumpsuit doing little to hide his athletic build. Command accepted, Captain, he said with exaggerated deference, though I wonder if you realize you're as much a prisoner here as I am. Jody's hand moved instinctively to the neural baton at her hip. Careful, Voros. Unlike some facilities, I don't need bureaucratic approval to employ disciplinary measures. Ah, the famous Cower temperament, he replied, unperturbed. Tell me, does it bother you that they've relegated a decorated tactician to warden duty? Or have you not yet figured out why you're really here? Her eyes narrowed. You seem rather talkative for someone facing execution at the end of the lunar cycle. Perhaps I simply enjoy intelligent conversation before my demise. His violet eyes held hers. Or perhaps I know something that might interest you about your reassignment. Despite herself, Jyoti felt a flicker of curiosity, quickly suppressed. Engaging with prisoners beyond protocol was precisely how officers found themselves compromised. Yet something about Voros unsettled her, not his rebellion credentials, which were impressive enough, but the calculating intelligence behind his casual demeanor. "Save your manipulations," she said coldly. "Your psychological profile indicated you would attempt to establish rapport. It won't work." Zarek laughed, a genuine sound that echoed oddly in the sterile cell. "They really do train you well, don't they? But I wonder what else was in that profile. Did they mention I was once a Dominion intelligence analyst? Or that I had access to the shadow archives before my change of allegiance?" Jyoti kept her expression neutral, though her mind raced. This detail had not been in his file, an omission that could hardly be accidental. "The processing officer will continue your intake," she said briskly, turning to leave. "Meal distribution begins at 0600 hours. "Captain," Zarek called after her, his voice suddenly stripped of its mocking quality. "Check security surveillance record TSC 2187 from 3 months ago. Your predecessor's logs, before you dismiss what I'm saying." She paused but didn't turn. "Enjoy your accommodations, Voros. They're the last you'll ever have." As she strode through the automated security checkpoints of the detention block, Jyoti found herself troubled by the encounter. Most rebels she'd processed displayed either defiant rage or resigned fatalism. Zarek's confident composure suggested something else entirely. A man with contingencies in place. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Pravin Dal, waited at the command center, his perpetually worried expression deepening when he saw her. "How was the infamous Voros?" he asked, falling into step beside her. "Predictably manipulative," she replied. Then, after a moment's hesitation, "Pravin, pull surveillance record TSC 2187 from 3 months back. Full security clearance." The lieutenant's eyebrows rose slightly, but he knew better than to question her directly. "Yes, Captain. Anything specific I should look for? Just get me the file. And Pravin," she added, lowering her voice, "keep this between us for now." Later that night, alone in her sparse quarters, Jyoti reviewed the security footage on a secure terminal. What she found made her blood run cold. The recording showed her predecessor, Captain Tanis, meeting with High Commander Varric of the Dominion's Special Operations Division. Their conversation was explicit. Helios 9 wasn't simply a detention facility for political prisoners. It was a testing ground for something called Project Lazarus, experimental neural reprogramming conducted on rebel leaders. The subjects remained conscious throughout the procedure, Varric explained clinically, in the recording. Complete personality overwrite takes approximately 16 days. Once complete, they're returned to their cells with no memory of the process. Captain Tanis looked uncomfortable. "And then?" "And then we release them," Varric smiled thinly. "They return to their rebel cells as perfect infiltrators, loyal only to the Dominion. They remember their cause, their comrades, everything except their true allegiance." Jyoti paused the recording, her hands trembling slightly. This violated every principle of the Interstellar Convention on Prisoner Treatment, laws the Dominion publicly championed while apparently flouting in secret. She resumed playback, watching as her predecessor asked the question now burning in her own mind. "Why am I only learning about this now?" Tanis demanded. Varric's expression hardened. "Because you only need to know what serves the Dominion's interests. Project Lazarus has been operational for 2 years, 12 subjects successfully reintegrated into rebel operations. Your job is to maintain the facility's cover as a standard detention center, and if I refuse, then you'll be reassigned. Immediately and permanently." The recording ended shortly after, but the implications were clear. Captain Tanis had been removed, likely for harboring doubts, and Jyoti installed as an unwitting accessory to an illegal operation. Sleep eluded her that night. By morning, she had made a decision that would either end her career or something much worse. She entered Zarek's cell block alone during the facility's night cycle, overriding the automated systems with her command codes. The rebel leader was awake, sitting on the edge of his bunk as if he'd been expecting her. "You saw it," he said simply. "Not a question." "How did you know about the recording?" she demanded, keeping her voice low. "Because I helped design the system. That archived it," Zarek replied, "before I discovered what it was being used for." Jodi's mind raced, connecting dots she hadn't seen before. "You're not just any rebel. You defected specifically because of Project Lazarus." He nodded once, his violet eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting. "I've spent 2 years dismantling their operation from the outside, locating and deprogramming their converts, until finally I allowed myself to be captured." "Allowed?" Jodi's hand instinctively moved toward her weapon. Why else would the Dominion's most wanted rebel be captured alive and brought to this specific facility? Zarek asked, rising slowly. "I needed to access the central node, the one place where all Project Lazarus data is stored." The realization hit Jodi like a physical blow. Helios 9 isn't just a testing site. It's the command center. Precisely. Hidden in plain sight, administered by officers who believe they're running a standard detention facility. His expression softened slightly. "Officers like you, Captain. Chosen for their exemplary service record and, more importantly, their unwavering belief in Dominion principles." Jodi paced the small cell, mind racing through implications. "If what you're saying is true, it is. Then why tell me? I could report this conversation immediately." Zarek's smile was grim. "Because they've scheduled me for processing tomorrow. Official records will show a standard execution, while in reality I'll undergo neural reprogramming, and once they've turned me, I'll lead them straight to the Resistance leadership." Jodi stopped pacing, facing him directly. "What exactly do you want from me, Voros?" "Initially? Access to the central database so I can transmit the Project Lazarus files to my allies. Expose the operation publicly." He met her gaze unflinchingly. "But now I think you might be willing to consider something more comprehensive." "I took an oath to the Dominion," she said stiffly. "You took an oath to protect its principles," he countered. "Ask yourself, Captain, does secretly reprogramming prisoners' minds uphold those principles? Is that the empire you pledged to serve?" His words struck a chord she couldn't easily dismiss. Jodi had dedicated her life to the Dominion, believing in its mission of bringing order to a chaotic galaxy. The revelation that her superiors violated the very laws they claimed to uphold shook the foundation of that belief. "Even if I wanted to help you," she said carefully, "the central system can only be accessed with dual authentication. Facility commander plus oversight authority." Zarek's expression shifted, a spark of triumph in his eyes. "Check your command. Tablet, Captain. I believe you received a priority communication approximately 3 minutes ago." Frowning, Jodi pulled out her device. Indeed, an encrypted message had just arrived, purportedly from High Command, granting her temporary oversight authority pending the arrival of Commander Varick's inspection team in 36 hours. She looked up sharply. "You arrange this." "I have allies in unexpected places," he acknowledged. "The question is, what will you do with this opportunity?" Jodi stared at the authorization, understanding the crossroads before her. Help Zarek expose Project Lazarus, betraying her direct superiors but potentially upholding the Dominion's true principles, or maintain her position and become complicit in something she found morally reprehensible. "If I help you," she said, slowly, "what happens afterward? You'll still be a rebel leader and I'll be a traitor. Or you'll be a whistleblower who prevented the Dominion from corrupting itself beyond recognition," Zarek replied. "There are factions within the government itself that oppose these methods. They simply lack the evidence to act." Dawn was approaching. Soon the facility would awaken to its daily routine. Jodi made her decision, squaring her shoulders with military precision. "You have until the shift change at OR 600, she said, deactivating the energy barrier between them. "After that, I'll report the system breach." Whether I report your involvement depends on what we find. Zarek stepped through the deactivated barrier, his eyes never leaving hers. A cautious compromise. I expected nothing less. As they moved through the darkened corridors toward the command center, an uneasy alliance formed between captor and captive. Jody found herself reassessing everything she thought she knew, about the Dominion, about the rebellion, and about the man walking beside her. "Tell me something, Voros," she said, as they reached the central computer terminal. "If you could have sliced into the system remotely, why allow yourself to be captured at all? Why take that risk?" Zarek's fingers flew across the interface, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. "Because some things can't be accessed remotely, and because seeing is believing." He glanced up at her. "Would you have accepted the truth without witnessing it yourself?" She conceded the point with a slight nod, watching as he navigated through layers of encrypted files. What they discovered in the next 20 minutes horrified her more than she could have imagined. Project Lazarus wasn't simply a rogue operation. It was the first phase of something called Directive Harmony, a galaxy-wide initiative to identify and recalibrate potential dissidents before they ever joined resistance movements. "They're planning to expand this to civilian populations," Jody whispered, reading through the implementation schedule. "Preemptive neural compliance for anyone expressing anti-Dominion sentiments." "Now you understand why I left," Zarek said, quietly. "This isn't maintaining order. It's the end of free will itself." As the facility systems began powering up for the day cycle, Jody made a final decision. She entered her command codes alongside Zarek's stolen access protocols, authorizing a complete data transmission to an anonymous receiving node. "This doesn't make us allies," she told him as they hastily erased evidence of their access. "But it does make us on the same side of this specific issue." "It's a start," he replied. Then, with unexpected formality, "Thank you, Captain Carr." "Don't thank me yet," she said grimly, reactivating his cell barrier just as the first alerts began, sounding throughout the facility. "We still have to survive the next 24 hours. As emergency protocols engaged around them, Jody and Zarek exchanged a look of grim determination. Two enemies forced into cooperation by a threat greater than their ideological divide, and perhaps the beginnings of understanding that the lines between rebellion and loyalty weren't as clear as either had once believed. The galaxy was about to change, and standing at the epicenter of that change was an unlikely pair: a Dominion captain who had just betrayed her direct orders, and a rebel leader who had risked everything on the belief that principles still mattered, even to those who served the empire he fought against. In that moment, with alarms blaring around them, Jody realized that freedom sometimes required the courage to break chains, even those of one's own making.